Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Isaac Christopher Lubogo, and I'm here in Neuenstein, Germany. I've been blessed and honored to be invited by a wonderful gentleman, a man of no mean reputation, and who has actually found his place or his calling in psychology here in Germany. He's called Mr. Horst Bertsch. He will introduce himself a little bit more, but I would like to take the liberty of inviting you, sir, to our audience in Uganda, particularly, but also in Africa and in the world. You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Okay, can you tell us briefly about yourself?
Okay. I'm 65 years old, married, and have two adult sons, 32 and 35 years. And for more than 15 years, Patrick is a friend of mine. And so because of him, I learned a lot about Uganda, and 5 years ago I stayed in Kampala and met a lot of persons there.
Yes.
And I'm very interested in Africans who suffers on different problems, but I hope I can give you some information that are good for you.
Right. And very, very important to notice that Mr. Horst, who is also an experienced psychologist, and he has got particular units, I don't know how you call them here.
Yes, I studied psychology in the university. Afterwards to the study, I have a 10-year-long education in therapy, therapy of children, therapy of adults, and therapy also of systems. So the systemic approach and the approach of behavioral therapy is my profession.
Excellent.
So for 30 years I'm working with mental ill people in our German healthcare service.
Excellent. Okay, particularly by way of introduction, I know that our discussion points will cut across, but particularly things that have to do with culture stigma and mental health, culture expression and distress, culture competence in mental health care, cross-culture differences in diagnosis and treatment, indigenous healing practices and integration, access to mental health services, immigration and accuracy, intersectionality, community-based mental health. And particularly, I would like, as a precursor, to have a general introduction about psychology. What is psychology? I would like to argue, perhaps as an introduction, then you can build on that, my brother. Psychology basically, is a scientific study of human behavior and mental processes, and it seeks to understand and explain how individuals think, feel, and behave in various situations and circumstances. Is there something out of your practice that you want to add on that definition of psychology?
So in university, I learned the state of mind of what's in the professional art of making therapy and what's to know about psychology. My outstanding interests is to see not only the classical kind of how to find a diagnosis or how to treat them, but how to explain illness in a philosophical kind of language, because in every culture persons create their own reality, and this kind of thinking, this kind of how they frame their all-day life, it makes a difference how good they can cope stress.
Right. And so you're virtually saying that psychology has a lot of advantage. You mentioned some of them. I would probably hint a few in the interest of time. Self-awareness and personal growth as an advantage. Understanding others, because we are interrelated, interconnected, and perhaps that also reminds me of the interconnection that we have with one another as human beings in this ecosystem that's intertwined. And then the issue of mental health and well-being, perhaps that's another aspect that's extremely important, and enhancing performance. Obviously, if our brains or our performance levels are not best, then we will not be able to have, that advantage in terms of acute or productive, best productive output from individuals. But also education and learning, social change and policy, problem solving and critical thinking, and then research and scientific inquiry also becomes another important aspect in terms of why we need to study psychology. Can you explain to us some of the major branches of psychology?
Some of them
branches, yes.
Okay. One of a very important approach is the behavioral therapy approach.
Yes.
So we focus how habits will learn you to feel or think automatically, and you, as a psychologist, you study the history of the creation of the reality of the person and how to make a difference that helps these guys to reorganize themselves. In former times, you discuss in psychology things like character or diagnosis. Actually, the systemic approach, for example, focus more on the self-reorganization and the input you can get from your environment.
Right. Okay, so the different types of psychology, like the honorable gentleman has told us, clinical psychology, perhaps counseling psychology, that you talked about, developmental psychology, social psychology, cognitive psychology, in terms of understanding the mental process, including perception, memory and language problem solving, and then behavior psychology. Industrial organization psychology also is another one, education psychology, health psychology, and also forensic psychology. And that reminds me of
legal
absolutely.
Or criminal psychology.
Yes.
In Germany or in Europe, it was the start of psychology.
Wow.
Not treating people, not working in the hospitals, but to help lawyers and the court to judge people.
Yes, true. And that is something that is actually missing from where I come from. I wrote a book called The Law of Forensics in Uganda, and many of the things that I talk about have to do with forensic psychology. I wrote a book, another one called Penology and Criminology as an aspect also has an embed in terms of psychology. And then we have also got what they call neuropsychology, which investigates relationship between brain function and behavior. So all those become important. Positive psychology is another one. But we environmental psychology, cross-cultural psychology, consumer psychology. Even now, someone was arguing last time that biometrics and also data psychology is also something that is eminent. Google Metrics, for example, if I post so much, or if I get on YouTube and get to know that I'm interested in Mbappe, for example, as football, I don't know if you know Mbappe, or I don't know what's the sport here, maybe FA or maybe basketball or football, like Lucas, your son, then Google will do it in such a way that they will keep sending adverts that have to relate with what I ordinarily look out for when I'm watching.
Yeah.
So that is something that has already been implanted by a psychologist behind the computer, and he knows using Google Metrics, so he can place and know this is something that they go. Even when you go for shopping, they send out adverts, but they know that your color is red, so they do. Yes. Go ahead.
And actually, the whole story about artificial intelligence will spread these things to very big thing, because you don't know how they tried to manipulate your thoughts with digital processes, with handy, with all these things in 10 years. And one of my teachers in the university, I talked with him 3 years ago, and he told me in 5 years maybe it's better if Facebook will vote for you. Because he knows more about your needs
Absolutely.
yourself.
Absolutely. What you're saying is true, because right now Google Metrics has a way of analyzing how you relate on your computer, on your phone, in such a way that they can actually make predictive decisions and even know that President Trump or perhaps President Biden will be the next president of America because of the trend, the algorithm that follows. So those predictive algorithms are easily ascertainable, and that's the point you bring about in terms of artificial intelligence. I read a book called The Future Lawyer, where I make advocacy in terms of artificial intelligence. And artificial intelligence is basically depends on patterns that have been repetitive and fed in a computer. So the computer can learn to imitate or replicate those patterns because it has learned those behavioral, innate behavioral psychological attributes that are independent within the individual. So what you're saying is very true. Let me take you a little bit deeper in terms of some of the things that I would have loved us to talk about in the interest of our time. What are some of the misconceptions? I know you talked about philosophy. Philosophy is basically a broad and fundamental field of inquiry that explores fundamental questions about the nature and reality in terms of knowledge, ethics, and existence. So like philosophy, basically it's intended to influence various fields in terms of profound impact on aspects of human knowledge. What is your comparison between philosophy and psychology?
Okay, for me, I studied both.
Oh, excellent.
And I studied the phenomenological approach that was in the 20th and 30th last century in Germany. But it's the basic thinking that builds the ground for systemic approach. And actually, physics and medicine focused a lot of brain, of neural concepts about the brain, and philosophy helps us to stay in contact that the brain is not the self, the brain is not the ego of a person, and you can't construct. As more you understand the neurological function of the brain, you can't understand the person and the character, and you can't predict what he will do. You learn a lot about the physics. You learn, for example, that freedom is also a human construct, and that some decisions are made in the brain before you are aware and you understand what. So the former concepts about consciousness or unconsciousness is old story.
Whoa, excellent.
Yeah.
Freedom is a concept, and that's something you must understand, but it's also a replication of your subconsciousness in terms of your thinking. I like that. And in terms of the misconception perhaps that we have between philosophy and psychology, there are those who argue in terms of epistemology versus ontology, where they're arguing that ontology is the argument of what is within, inside, whereas epistemology is what is outside.
Yeah.
What is your discourse in terms of that?
So I'm a pupil of Heidegger. Maybe I don't know if you know
I know
Heidegger.
him. Yes.
And his concept is that the ontology of mind is an internal process, and so for me it's necessary to understand all the inner processes, but not on a medical, but more on a philosophical or on a self-constructional level.
Wow, excellent. Other than Edgar, I have some interesting people that I'd like to bring to your attention. I don't know if some of them come to mind, but I know as an experienced person, you probably heard of Sigmund Freud. Sigmund Freud,
Yeah.
yes, who referred to the father of psychoanalysis. Freud revolutionized what the understanding of human behavior. and involved what they call the comprehensive theory of unconscious mind, and also they propose the concept of defense mechanism and then psychosexual development and the role of dreams in understanding the psyche. Then people like B.F. Skinner, I'd probably heard about him, a leading figure in behaviorism. The other was Carl Rogers, known for his contributions of human psychology as well. So I'm impressed that those are people who you rub shoulders with in terms of intellectualism, as it were. Ivan Pavlov is another one, perhaps, and then Abraham Maslow, and then of course Mary Ainsworth, and then Levi Vygotsky, and John Watson, several others, as we will probably be able to comprehend. Yes, particularly also in terms of the follow-up, I would like us to have an interaction or a discussion that has to do with how psychology can be able to affect the decisions of an ordinary person in day-to-day activities. I know, before we go to grief as an element that's extremely important, because I know you deal in post-trauma, also, relief in terms of psychological relief. But how relevant is a psychologist? Do I, for example, as an individual, need to have my own psychologist? Do I need to have a review of going to a psychologist to listen to me, or to tell my stories, or to counsel me? In Africa, there's a saying that we are mad, all of us are mad to only a particular extent. I'm not whether that's true or not. I don't know what's your input on that.
Yeah, my opinion is that I love my job. It's a part of my life, and it's a part of being in life. But my main goal is to be not necessary. So, in fact, for example, Sigmund Freud also told you his job was to learn the inner processes, to make concepts, to teach medicines or psychologists. But he also told you that analyzing your dream is normally not necessary, because in your unconscious part, he has his own logic, and he finds solutions where you don't need to share it with your consciousness. So it works for its own, and sometimes this also defines how I work with clients, because I am solution focused, and I'm very interested about psychoanalysis, and I'm not a behavioral therapist in my heart. I'm more a transactional analyst. But in fact, it's not necessary to have your own psychologist. In my mind.
There's a gentleman called Pascal. I don't know if you probably know him, but he probably was also a psychologist. But he said something that be careful with your wants, because the moment you get them, you won't want them anymore. He said it's not the it that you want, it's the fantasy of the it. In other words, life is like a mirage. You know a mirage. You're chasing a mirage, and then the moment you look at it, you're like, oh my goodness, I have got it, but I don't want it anymore. So he says your desire must be perpetually absent. It's not the it you want, but the fantasy of the it. What's your comment about that?
Difficult to tell, because yes, I agree with Pascal, because if you are not focused on your goals or on your desires, but they rule you unconsciously, maybe it helps to find more happiness than if you understand everything. It's like love. If you understand all details, because you love your woman, maybe you lose interest.
Absolutely. In others, sometimes they say the devil is in the details.
Yes.
So we have to be very careful with that. So anyways, I am...
But yes. Also, I think it is necessary in this kind of how we are interested in truth now in our discussion. Psychology is not an all-day friend to think about everything, but it's necessary in the philosophical kind or also in the political kind, and so you need advices, hints for people who defines the rules and games of the society.
Excellent, excellent. Let's talk about maybe before I lose that, I would like to smuggle in something in respect to our blueprint that we're following that had to do with hypnosis.
Okay.
There's a gentleman called Spoonbender. I don't know if you heard about Spoonbender.
No, I learned hypnosis by Milton Erickson.
Okay, there's a guy called Spoonbender. Spoonbender wrote a book, and where he was arguing that one time they were supposed to be going to they were hired by the U.S. government, and they were supposed to attend more like a symposium, a conference, I think, to be with the people of North Korea. But North Korean and Americans are known not to go along, as you know. And they were hired specifically because he said they had the gift of sitting down on a desk with you and be able to look at you, but penetrate your mind and cause your mind to be influenced in a certain direction. So they were specifically hired by the US government, and they went as diplomats and stuff like that. Every gifting of talent, so the best of the best of the best in terms of every attribute. So they went and sat and were able to sit down. And as they were sitting down, the duty, of course, the other guys had other things they were doing, not that they were only relying on these. They had the best, people in terms of alternative dispute resolutions, every segment. But these ones were supposed to use their minds, penetrate their minds, and influence their decisions. And Spoonbender is a guy who looks at this spoon like this and with intent and bends it, and looks at a glass of water with intent and breaks it. Is that part of psychology, in your opinion? Is this something is there a part of the mind that we're not using?
I believe in the part of mind that it exists. In Germany we call this parapsychology because it's difficult. No, if you are in the main topics of psychology, it's state of mind to be a man of the university and not a man of beliefs and hocus pocus. But the power of mind is more than you can learn at the university. And for example, I teach a lot of sportsmen in mental strategies. And if you are very focused, if you can create aura, this have an enormous effect of others. So the interaction is very influenced of so-called seltsam, of strange or weird techniques. And they are also cultural dependent. Maybe if you use a voodoo technique in Germany, this doesn't work because you don't touch the beliefs of the persons. In Africa, maybe you help someone. And some moments ago, I talked with Moses, and he talked about rebels or child soldiers. And 20 years ago, I read about a ritual in Africa where they broke an egg. I don't know if you know about something about the ritual. In Germany, I can't understand what's happening during this, but for people there, I believe that it's an enormous effect.
So you think the belief system or the cultural antecedents that surround
Yes.
our belief system eventually affect our thinking
Yeah.
and maybe power us subconsciously to believe in certain directions
Yes.
or to believe in certain things.
Okay.
I would imagine so. I don't know. Let me give you another example.
And,
Yes.
and another part, because you told about hypnosis or
Yes.
something else.
Yes.
For example, when I told you about the sportsman and the mental strategies. For example, if you talk about football and there's a penalty, yeah, and here's the guy who will shoot, and here's the torwart,
The goalkeeper?
the goalkeeper. Maybe if they both are professionals, if they both are good in techniques, the only difference is the way they look at themselves.
Wow.
Because this makes a difference.
Wow.
Yeah, the technique maybe is the same.
Yes.
But if you try to create a difference, maybe you look at him like hypnotic, and maybe you think you as a goalkeeper believes I'm shooting in the left corner, in the left corner, in the left corner, in the left corner.
So it keeps.
And then I will shoot in the right. Maybe you catch the ball, but it makes a difference because maybe I shoot in the right corner and you go to the left. It strokes my belief, and I have the subjective belief that I made this.
Yes.
And this pushes up my belief system, my power.
Yes, the confidence.
And if it's true or not, it's not important. But the process of believing and pushing yourself makes the 5% more energy you need.
Wow.
Yeah?
Excellent. That's beautiful because it tells me something. Yesterday I was in a stadium in Germany here, and there's a gentleman who rode the fastest supersonic automobile, and one of the things that he wrote was that don't just wish it, make it happen. So you're arguing that the belief system, our confidence, can propel us to do things perhaps that are imaginable, even outside our own strength. I think it also was J.F. Kennedy, I think, who said that it's not the fear that you should be afraid. It's a fear itself. Yeah. The absence of fear. So the point you're making here is extremely important. But also, let me perhaps give another example of a gentleman called John Moore. I think John Moore had the grandmother had one of those diseases that we talk about that had to do with the dementia, forgetting everything, and couldn't even remember, where they put the next cap and stuff like that. I think it's very common in Europe and a little bit of Africa. And he dedicated his life to harness his memory, to use his memory. And he wrote a book called Moonwalking with Einstein. And he said he actually went ahead and won almost every memory competition championship in the US and entire world. And this is a guy you could just put a deck of cards, cards, and then you flip them over, and he will tell you where each one was in its right position.
Yes.
So the argument is that he said we have the ability to use our brains to make them, turn them into something. Actually, the book is called The Art of Remembering Everything. Although he was arguing that it's important that, I think I was reading somewhere, that it's important that the brain should have the capacity to forget. Because if it doesn't have the capacity to forget, then you will get clouded and burst perhaps. There's a gentleman actually who was reading who had the same problem. He could remember every employee, the colleagues at the work, he could remember the boss's assignments, every little detail, and he actually died because the brain doesn't have that ability to give up the... as a psychologist, is that something that you see in life?
Yes, I see in life that, for example, the logic of memories are really a complex organizational process, for example, myself, if I come home from holidays, I don't know the names of my clients because in between 3 weeks I forget everything. So it's like if you don't have a hard disk in your computer. But but if I open the door for them, I know their telephone number. And after 3 to 5 sentences, I don't need to read what I wrote the whole therapy. I knew everything, but it needs a special trigger to open the doors to my memory.
Yes.
And some people try to explain how to increase the power of your memories, and you use the total brain. Most of the time I'm wondering about the different techniques that are possible, and I don't know that there's only one way, but there's different kind of arts how to understand how our brain will work.
Memory pellets, I think they say, the argument I think that John Four was trying to advise is the use of memory pellets, where you visualize or you attach what you want to remember onto a color or perhaps onto a memory or onto an image, and you never forget that. We're concluding, don't worry. I want us to discuss briefly about grief. Grief is something that is eminent in Africa and perhaps even here. When you come here, I have a gentleman called Moses, and they were counseling and said, you may not speak about demons or manifestations. You have to talk about things like depression, like bipolar, stuff like that. What is the biggest cause of grief generally, in your opinion, as a psychologist?
The biggest thing, I think, is fear and depression.
Depression. And things like perhaps the death of a loved one, divorce or breakup, loss of a pet. I have a friend who lost a pet. In Africa, you lose a pet like a cat or a dog, I'll simply throw it in the dustbin. Here, it's another story. There's a lot of attachment.
Yeah, in our culture, to have an animal is to increase your family. And for example, my mother-in-law suffers from Alzheimer. So she forgets everything. She don't know that I'm still her son-in-law. And it was very hard to lose her. But 3 months after that, we lose our dog. And we are weird about our feelings because we are more sad. No, that's not right. But we feel more our sadness during the loss of our dog.
Oh, yeah.
Because the loss of our mother or mother-in-law, we have to cope for 5 years, and it's gone. And this thing is not the actual thing. And the other, I think it's not the, it's a mix. At first is we have a relation to our dog like a part of a family.
Right.
And second, it's not only the dog, but it stands also as a symbol for others, for other relatives.
Okay.
And for example, you talked about Ainsworth.
Yes.
I studied 2 years by Ainsworth. With Ainsworth.
Oh, wonderful.
And studied the bonding process with Bowlby, and we discuss a lot of things. And she is checking how mothers are caring for their babies when they are 3 months old. I compare it with dolphins and how dolphins care for their babies. And we saw that the bonding system is one of the important things. Right. And so if grief is an answer of your bonding, it depends on which is your subject.
Wow.
Where you depend.
Excellent. Empirical findings relating to grief. We have the lady called Kubler-Ross, I think you probably know her, who proposed some of the basic stages, emotional stages that individuals express or go through during time of loss. And one of the things I think that I wanted to mention for our viewers that's extremely important are the stages of grief, right?
Yeah.
We could go through them in conclusion so that in the interest of time, yes, I will mention one by one and then you will explain so that people can comprehend where we're coming from and understand. Okay, the concept of grief, as it was popularized by Elizabeth Kubler in her book, The Death and Dying, published in 1969.
Yeah.
And she said 5 stages of grief. The first one was denial, right?
Denial.
The second one was anger. The third one is bargaining. Fourth one is depression. Fifth is acceptance. And insight into that.
Okay. At first, also for your audience,
Yes.
I need Patrick to translate the words because I know the 5 steps, but in German.
That's okay.
So the first
Say them
step
in
is
German.
denial.
No problem. Say in Germany and then you use your direct translate. Yeah.
No, I don't need to talk it in German, but
Yes.
I need to his translation for
The first step?
The first step is denial.
Denial is...
Leugnung.
Yeah, genau.
Okay, so I understand because it's the same, but
Yes.
I want to check if it's the same.
Okay. Yes, denial.
Okay, denial means I'm a girl, you are my husband. You die, and then I cry, and next I need a long time to fall asleep tonight, and next morning I wake up and my first hope is last day was a dream. I don't lose you. It's not true. I will find you again. I will hear, I will smell your perfume, I will hear your voice, and I'm happy because then my first thought is, he's here again. He's still here. That's what means denial.
Yeah. Second step, anger.
Anger means I realize one step more is I don't Patrick, was heißt abwerten?
Abwerten? Expect?
No, not expect. Neglect, understand? No, neglect. Neglect?
Yeah, neglect.
I don't neglect steps how to neglect reality. I'm not sure what neglect means. It's I have a doubt. Yeah?
Yes.
Okay. And if I in the second step I realize he's dead. But my first answer is emotion, but not sadness, but anger. And anger means I'm angry about him to go, that he's gone, or about me, or about everything in our behavior and our history, what's not finished.
Right. Number 3, bargaining. Individuals attempt to negotiate with a higher power or reverse the loss. Bargaining as a third step.
So bargaining.
Verhandeln, so dass du schaust, dass du willst quasi verhandeln, ob zurück oder nicht.
Okay, so maybe because I'm at home with the German words, so maybe your audience will understand that I need a little time.
That's okay.
I think the third step talks about how to make the next step in realizing what's the truth.
Okay.
So I want to know why has it happened?
Sure.
What can I do to overcome the pain and the grief?
Right.
I tried to make a deal with God or with my lost relative, or what's the topic of the grief?
Excellent.
And so it's the real process and progress to make deals with the reality, how I can cope that it's true. So in my words, I have 3 steps.
Right. Excellent.
So may I introduce my 3 steps? Maybe you can.
Your 3 steps. Okay. The last one. Okay. Let me just.
Okay. First we discuss the.
Okay. The second last will be depression, which I think is obvious.
Yeah.
Coming in terms of reality of the loss, and then the acceptance, understanding that now I know.
Yeah.
It's what it's a bad deal or something has happened.
Yeah.
Yes, but now go ahead and introduce your options. Yes.
Bei diesen 3 Schritten brauche ich ein bisschen deine Hilfe, weil das viel Grammatik ist zu übersetzen. The first step is, it's not the truth.
Okay.
It's not the truth.
It's not the truth.
I don't accept.
Yes.
I don't accept what you tell me about the truth. It's not. It hasn't happened.
It hasn't happened.
The next step is it happens. It happened. It has happened, and it's allowed to accept that it had happened. And so you know about the kind of grammatic. You understand that the past is making step by step, and if you are at the last step that you can accept that it had happened,
right.
you can be happy because and explore this new feeling,
right.
because you can see, oh, we lived for 30 years together, we have happy times, I can remember you and activate positive memories,
right.
and this is good for my heart,
right.
better than to grieve.
Right.
Okay.
Excellent. Okay, so some of the symptoms of grief include emotional symptoms, intense sadness, despair, anguish, crying, numbness, guilt, mood swings and stuff like that. Then cognitive symptoms as well, difficult in terms of feelings or intrusive thoughts, disbelief, denial. Then psychological or physical symptoms that have to do with sleep disturbances, insomnia, excessive sleeping, changes in appetite, fatigue and loss of wear. Then behavior symptoms that have to do with avoidance of places. So there's things that we need to look out as individuals, even as we, because grief is a very terrible thing. And then social symptoms, feeling of isolation and loneliness, and then existential symptoms, questioning the meaning of life, purpose of one's existence, and then anniversary reactions. Some individuals may experience what they call intensified grief symptoms, and then somatic symptoms that have to do with underlying medical causes such as unexplained aches or pains or health issues, and many others as we can share emotional numbness, accommodation, intervention, and life like that. But in conclusion, perhaps, of our discussion here, I would like my friend to give us an interaction in terms of some of the major diseases that you think you have, treated that underline what we're talking about, examples of grief illnesses.
Yeah.
Yes, major ones.
You want to know?
Yes, some of them.
You want to know some of the diseases I treated?
In terms of grief illness. I'll give examples, for example, major depressive disorders, what you call MDD, anxiety disorders, schizophrenia. And
in my office.
In your office, yes. Bipolar disorder.
I worked with everybody, and because I worked with everybody, I mainly have disorders with depression and anxiety disorders and schizophrenia, bipolar disorders and behavioral disorders and character disorders.
Wow.
So, but in fact, the most problems people have with grief are when they lose people, or when they lose their job, or when they lose their identity. For example, if you have schizophrenia, it depends also how old are you and how long you are aware of your own personality. If you are 20 years old and you suffer from schizophrenia, your ego state is not so fixed and long lasted, so it makes more grief for you because you don't know who you are.
dear.
when it's gone.
Okay, so now the honorable gentleman is going to give us solutions to those major problems, because this is perhaps the main reason why we are sharing this. This is the most important part of our discussion. Let me just mention the diseases, because you may have the disease and you may not know. Some people have denials they don't want to accept until someone points it out and says, by the way, there's a problem. But let me just mention them, and then he will give us a general blanket of how perhaps we can have what? Self-awareness, but also how we can solve these challenges. Because you could run mad and without you knowing. Major depressive disorders, for example, anxiety disorders, and then things to do with schizophrenia that he talked about, disorganized thinking, social withdrawals and stuff like that, and then things to do with bipolar disorder, post-traumatic disorder, obsessive compulsory disorder, borderline personality disorder, eating disorder. Think about that. Eating disorder. Extremely important, you know. And then we have other things like attention deficit or hyperactivity disorder, autism spectrum disorder, substance use disorder, schizoaffective disorder, dissociative identity disorder, major neurocognitive disorder, or what they call dementia, and then generalized anxiety disorder, conduct disorder, intermittent explosive disorder, substance-induced disorders, body dimorphic disorders, hoarding disorders, avoidant personality disorders, you know, postpartum depression, so many, gender dysphoria, you know, specific phobia, insomnia disorder. All those are issued. Then there's this interesting one which is called narcissism, which amazed me when I got to know about narcissism and the symptoms of narcissism. I'll mention them if I have time. But there's so many disorders, as I said.
Yeah.
What advice would you give people in terms of addressing those disorders?
Okay.
Yes.
So, because you're addressing people who are maybe looking at this video,
Yes.
I will tell you first, there is no general solution. But maybe there is a solution for you. And one of the first thing I will advise is try to find someone who's professional, because you can check if your belief what you have is right or not. Because maybe you are suffering of a schizophrenia and you don't know it or you don't believe it, because this kind of illness means that you will be the last to understand that you are ill. But if you have problems with others, use it to look for an advice. For others, I will tell you, I will give you advices on two levels. The first level is psychology. As a psychologist, I will advise you that you need three things to survive. The first is a structure in the day.
Structure in the day.
Structure in the day. If you suffer, your attention will fall inside. You look at yourself and all the thoughts and feelings are cruising around yourself. And this has also a hypnotic effect that stabilizes the dysfunctional processes inside of your soul. So you need to find a way to focus outside. For example, you see me and maybe you see something standing on the table. If I try to focus outside myself, I can change my point of view and try only to describe what I'm seeing outside. I'm sitting here on my table, I see some flowers on the table, they are yellow, some have a black point in the middle, there are also violet flowers, there are some cakes on the table, there is a glass with sugar and a spoon, there's some beautiful nice guys here on the table, but beautiful nice guy is a judgment, this is not a description. So try to understand, we're talking about descriptions.
Right.
If you stay with descriptions, you don't suffer from your maybe dysfunctional cognitive processes. And for example, if you suffer from borderline or from depression, your thoughts are, if you look through a black glassed spectacles, and this changes your kind of thinking and your feelings. So, second advice. First advice, structure of a day means you have plans hour by hour, what you can do, and if you are bored or if you feel bad, you should have some plans, what is your duty, what should be done, and others, what can be good for you. You can take a bath, you can write a friend, you can talk with somebody, you can have a cup of coffee and the sun in your back and the warmth of a blanket or something else. And in the evening you can look back to the day and you can find 2 or 3 things which you are happy of and which you are responsible for. You have done it. If you are mental ill, your power to create your own day is low. And if you change something to give you the feeling you can make a difference, helps you very much because life is in your hands.
Right.
Second step. If you feel bad, if you have grief, you will lose your social contacts. To lose social contacts in the first 5 minutes is beautiful because it's not so difficult. You don't have to play a role. You don't have to be strong or make show. But in the second step, you lose everything what helps you to feel self-confident. That you don't receive strokes, you don't receive social attendance, and this lowers your feelings. Third step, you should remember what was funny or what was nice or what was easy to do in the past. Some people have to look 1 month ago, others have to look 10 years ago. But it's necessary that you get more in contact with your needs. And that can be easy, normal needs, that can be deeper needs. Some people have needs for social contact or for to be touched. Others have the need to go for a swim or to have a special dinner. If you have experienced what made you happy last year, repeat it.
Right.
You won't have, it's not necessary to want it. You should only do it.
Right.
And maybe after doing, your feelings will change.
Right.
But you don't know it at first.
Right. Okay, excellent. Now, so narcissism is the last one that I'm concluding with. And narcissism, because I see that it is evidently popular in where we come from, in our jurisprudence, narcissism becomes a personality trait that is characterized by excessive preoccupation with oneself, a grandiose sense of self-importance, a need of admiration, a lack of empathy for others. It's very, very evident in the kind of situation where we come from. But for purposes of more, I would like to concentrate on our conclusion in a sense that I am writing a book, and my brother here may have an impact on it, called The Guardians of the Mind. Guardians of the Mind, navigating the tapestry of mental illness and associated illnesses within the protective laws of Uganda. And that is it's going to be a bestseller, and I would like my friend here I would share with him, maybe he can write a review for us of that book so that we can be able to continue educating nations.
Okay.
But I would like to thank you for the interesting discussion that we've had. I think our audience will definitely appreciate all the wonderful words that have come from you. For avoidance of doubt, he is a psychologist of no less reputation. He has distinguished himself around this area and treated several diseases that have to do with psychological challenges. So Mr. Horst Bertsch is also, as I said, our host today, and here in Neuenstein, Germany. So we want to thank you. In conclusion, is there anything you want to conclude, sir?
I only was waiting if you ask me something about narcissism.
Well, you can say something about narcissism. No
Okay.
problem.
What I maybe we discuss a lot about psychology.
Yes.
And the history of psychology.
Yes.
And in former times, also together with your thoughts about psychology of law and legal psychology, psychology creates a lot of systems about personality, character, and in Germany, for example, in the society, it's common if you talk about narcissism that you talk bad about persons. In a professional way, it only means the self-organization of a person. And if you don't believe that it's a structure of brain or something else, or only depending on the DNA, it's difficult but changeable.
Right.
And first it means that you believe too much in yourself, and that this affects disorders in your social behavior. You are egoistic, you push other people to serve your needs, and you don't be sensible for their needs. And so it's a little bit like a dictator.
That's the reason why I didn't want to mention so much, because it's very evident in where we come from of certain individuals who might be suffering from that without knowing that they're suffering from it. Yes, but thank you so much. I think we've been blessed and honored to have you, and he's also being extremely helpful. There's my friend called Engineer Sereko, who he has partnered with, together with some people, to help establish a hospital in Uganda, and things are in the pipeline, and we are forever grateful. He has visited Uganda. What did you like most about Uganda?
Oh, I like the waterfalls in Hutchinson. Huh?
Makshan Forest.
Makshan Falls.
Makshan Falls.
And the streets of Kampala.
Very different from those we have here in Germany. So thank you once again. God bless you, and thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Right.